The sun rose over London on a special day in history. It was the morning of King Charles II's coronation. The sky was clear and blue. All around the city, people woke up early. They wanted to be part of this big day. In Kensington Palace, Prince William opened his eyes before his alarm went off. He had not slept much. Today, his father would become king. This meant William was now one step closer to being king himself someday. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, thinking about all this. "Are you awake?" Catherine asked softly. She was already up, her hair pulled back neatly. "Yes," William said. "Big day ahead." Catherine smiled at him. She knew what he was feeling. She got up and went to check on their children. The kids needed to be ready early too. William walked to the window and looked out at the London sky. He remembered his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth I. She had been queen for so long. Now his father would wear the crown. William felt happy, but also a bit sad. Times were changing. In the children's rooms, there was much activity. Prince George, who was 9 years old, was trying to fix his own tie. He wanted to look grown up. Princess Charlotte was sitting very still while a helper did her hair. Prince Louis, the youngest at 5 years old, was jumping on his bed in his underwear. "Louis," Catherine said, trying not to laugh, "we need to get you dressed now." "But I don't want to sit still all day," Louis said with a pout. "It's a special day for Grandpa," Charlotte told her little brother. "We all have to be on our best behavior." George nodded seriously. "I'll help Louis, Mum," he said to Catherine. George was already acting like the future king he would one day be. Catherine smiled at her oldest son. "Thank you, George." Back in their bedroom, William was putting on his military uniform. It was red and gold with many medals. He looked at himself in the mirror. The uniform was heavy with history. His father had worn something like this, his grandfather too. And now it was his turn. A helper came in to make sure everything was perfect. "You look very handsome, Your Royal Highness," she said. William nodded. "Thank you, Mary. How are the crowds looking?" "Very big, sir. People have been camping out all night to get good spots." William felt the weight of the day ahead. Millions of people would be watching. Not just in London, but all around the world. They would be looking at him, at Catherine, at the children. The royal family had to be perfect today. Catherine came back wearing a silk robe. Her coronation outfit was hanging up, waiting. It was a beautiful dress in cream color with small pearls. She had worked with a famous designer to create it. "The children are almost ready," she told William. "Louis is being Louis, of course." William smiled. "He's just 5. I'm sure we can keep him in line for a few hours." "George is being such a help," Catherine said. "And Charlotte remembers everything about the ceremony. She's been practicing her curtsy all week." They heard a crash from down the hall, then Louis's giggle. "I'd better go," Catherine said with a smile. William nodded. He looked at the clock. Soon they would leave for Westminster Abbey. Soon his father would become King Charles II. The day they had planned for years was finally here. Outside the palace, the streets were filling with people. They carried flags and pictures of the royal family. Some wore fancy hats. Others had brought chairs and snacks. They were all there to see history happen, to see the coronation of a new king, and to see Prince William and his family, who would one day be their king and queen too. William took a deep breath. It was time to get ready. Time to be royal. Time to show the world that the monarchy was in good hands for the future. The time had come to leave Kensington Palace. Outside, a line of shiny black cars waited. Men in dark suits stood by the cars. They were part of the royal security team. Their job was to keep William and his family safe. William walked out first. His uniform was perfectly straight. The gold buttons shined in the morning light. Catherine followed him. She looked beautiful in her cream dress. A small tiara sat on her head. It had once belonged to Princess Diana, William's mother. Catherine wore it to honor her. "Wow," "Money looks like a princess in a story," Louis said loudly. He was holding his nanny's hand. George and Charlotte walked out together. George wore a small version of his father's uniform. Charlotte had on a pretty white dress with a flower in her hair. Both children looked very grown-up. "Remember, best behavior today," William said softly to his children. "The whole world is watching." "Yes, Father," George said. He stood up straighter. "I'll watch Louis," Charlotte promised. She was good at keeping her little brother in line. They all got into the cars. The inside was soft black leather. The windows were dark, so people could not see in well, but the family could see out. As the cars started to move, Louis pressed his face to the window. "So many people," he said. "Are they all here to see Grandpa?" "Yes," Catherine said. "And to see us too." "Wave to them, Louis." Louis waved his small hand. Outside, the crowds cheered when they saw the little prince waving. The cars moved slowly through London streets. Every spot was filled with people. They waved flags. They took pictures. Some people had camped out all night to get good spots. Many wore clothes in red, white, and blue, the colors of the British flag. "Look at that lady's hat," Charlotte said, pointing at a woman wearing a hat shaped like a crown. William smiled. People are very excited about today. Inside the car, William felt his phone buzz. It was a text from his brother, Harry. "Good luck today. You'll all do great." William smiled a small smile. Things had been hard between the brothers for years, but today it seemed they were just family again. The cars drove past famous London places. They passed Big Ben, the giant clock tower. They drove by the River Thames. Finally, they came to Westminster Abbey. This big old church had seen many royal events over hundreds of years. Kings and queens had been crowned here since long ago. William had married Catherine here. And now his father would become king here. Outside the abbey, even more people waited. There were TV cameras from all over the world. Reporters spoke quickly into microphones. Police officers kept everyone in order. The royal cars stopped at the front door. A man in a fancy uniform opened the car door for William. "Ready?" William asked his family. Catherine took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." They stepped out into the bright morning light. The crowd's cheers grew louder. Thousands of voices called their names. Thousands of hands waved at them. William stood tall. Catherine smiled warmly. George and Charlotte walked nicely beside them. Louis held his mother's hand tightly, his eyes wide at all the noise and people. "Wave, children," Catherine said quietly. "These people have waited hours to see us." The family waved together. Cameras flashed all around them. This picture would be in newspapers all over the world tomorrow. A group of important people waited to greet them at the door. There were church leaders in flowing robes. There were government officials in dark suits. William shook hands with them all. Catherine did small curtsies. The children copied their parents perfectly. Inside the abbey, music played. The sound of the organ filled the big stone church. William looked up at the high ceiling. He thought about all the kings and queens who had stood here before. Now it was his father's turn. An official in a red and gold coat showed them to their seats. They were in the very front row. From here, they would see everything. William took his place with Catherine beside him. The children sat down too, their backs straight, just as they had practiced. Louis whispered loudly, "Is Grandpa king yet?" "Not yet," Charlotte whispered back. "But he will be soon." William looked around at the filled church. Important people from all over the world sat in the rows behind them. The biggest day in his father's life was about to begin. The inside of Westminster Abbey was filled with light and color. Sunlight came through the tall windows. It made the gold things shine bright. Flowers were everywhere in white, red, and blue. The flags of many countries hung from the walls. William and his family sat quietly as they waited. More important people came in. There were kings and queens from other countries. There were presidents and prime ministers, All the seats were filling up. Louis kept wiggling in his seat. He was not used to sitting still for so long. "When will it start?" he whispered to Charlotte. "Soon," she said. "Look, the choir is coming in now." A group of singers in white robes walked in 2 lines down the middle of the church. They were the choir. Some were grown-ups and some were children not much older than George. They stood in their special place and waited. Music began to play. It was loud and grand. Everyone stood up. This meant that King Charles was coming. William felt his heart beat faster. He remembered being a small boy watching his mother at big events like this. Now he was a grown man with children of his own, and his father was about to become king. The big doors at the end of the church opened. King Charles walked in slowly. He wore a long red robe with white fur. It had a long train that people behind him had to carry. He looked serious but happy. Queen Camilla walked behind him. She wore a white dress and carried flowers. They walked down the middle of the church as everyone watched. "There's Grandpa," George whispered. "He looks different." William nodded. His father did look different today. He looked like a king. When Charles reached the front of the church, he nodded at William and his family. Catherine smiled back. The children gave small waves. Louis had to be reminded by Charlotte not to wave too big. The ceremony began. The Archbishop, who is an important church leader, spoke about duty and service. He talked about how being king was a big job. Charles would need to work hard for his country. William listened carefully. Someday, these same words would be said about him when he became king. He felt Catherine take his hand for a moment. She knew what he was thinking. The most important part came next. Charles had to make promises. He promised to be fair and good. He promised to protect the church. He promised to follow the laws. After each promise, he put his hand on the Bible and said, "I will." Then came the crowning. Charles sat in a special chair that was over 700 years old. The Archbishop held up the crown. It was heavy with gold and jewels. Some of those jewels had been in the crown for hundreds of years. "Look at the big shiny hat," Louis said, a bit too loudly. Catherine quickly put her finger to her lips, but many people nearby smiled. They thought Louis was cute. The Archbishop placed the crown on Charles's head. Trumpets played a loud, happy sound. Everyone in the church said together, "God save the King." William felt proud and sad at the same time. Proud of his father. Sad that his mother was not here to see this day. He thought Diana would be proud of how her sons had grown up. After the crowning, it was time for the royal family to show respect to the new king. William walked to his father and kneeled before him. He looked up at Charles, now wearing the crown. "I promise to serve you, my king," William said. These were words that had been said by royal sons for many hundreds of years. Charles looked at his son with love in his eyes. This was more than a king looking at a subject. This was a father looking at his son. He reached out and touched William's shoulder. "Rise, my Prince of Wales," he said. William stood up. For a moment, father and son looked at each other. So much had happened between them over the years, good times and hard times. But now, they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were part of history. From his seat, George watched carefully. Someday, he would do what his father had just done. Charlotte sat very straight, trying to remember every detail to tell her friends later. Louis was counting the jewels in the crown. The coronation was halfway done, but the most special family moment had already happened. After William paid respect to his father, the ceremony continued. More prayers were said. More music was played. King Charles sat on his throne, looking both happy and serious at the same time. The children were getting tired of sitting still. Louis started to swing his legs. Charlotte gave him a small nudge to remind him to be good. George sat very straight, watching everything with careful eyes. Catherine leaned over to William. "You did well," she whispered. "That was a beautiful moment between you two." William smiled at her. He was glad she was by his side today. Catherine always knew the right thing to say. Now it was time for the other royal family members to pay respect to the new king. One by one, they came forward. They bowed or curtsied to Charles. Some of them were his cousins, some were distant relatives. All of them showed respect to him as their king. Louis watched with big eyes. "Do I have to bow to Grandpa now?" he asked. "Not today," Catherine told him. "You're too young, but someday you will." "I know how," Charlotte said. She had been practicing her curtsy for weeks. She was disappointed she wouldn't get to show it today. The ceremony was long. There were many parts to it. The same things had been done at coronations for hundreds of years. Nothing could be skipped or rushed. People started to notice how well William's children were behaving. Most children their age would be very bored by now. But George, Charlotte, and Louis were sitting nicely. They were whispering sometimes, but they were not making trouble. "The Cambridge children are so well behaved," one lady whispered to another. "Their parents have done a good job with them." William did not hear this, but he would have been proud if he had. He and Catherine worked hard to teach their children good manners. Even on normal days at home, the children had to be polite and follow rules. Now there was another important part of the ceremony. King Charles was given special things that showed he was king. He was given a golden ball called an orb. He was given a fancy stick called a scepter. He was given rings for his fingers. Each thing had a special meaning. "Look at all the gold," Louis said, his eyes wide. "Shay," Charlotte told him. "We need to be quiet now." George looked at his father. "Will you get all those things someday?" he whispered. William nodded. "And then someday, so will you," he said quietly. George thought about this. It was a big idea for a young boy to think about. Someday, he would be king too. The ceremony went on. More prayers were said. More songs were sung. By now, many people had been in the church for more than 2 hours. Some of the older people looked tired. Louis was getting restless. He started to fidget more. Catherine took a small book from her purse and gave it to him. The book had pictures of animals in it. Louis looked at it happily. William noticed a photographer taking pictures of his family. He knew these pictures would be in newspapers tomorrow. He was glad Catherine had thought to bring something for Louis. Finally, the main parts of the ceremony were done. King Charles stood up from his throne. Now wearing his crown and royal robes, he walked slowly down the middle of the church. Everyone bowed or curtsied as he passed by. Queen Camilla walked behind him. She was now wearing a smaller crown. She smiled at people as she passed. When the king and queen reached William and his family, Charles slowed down. He gave them a special smile. This was not just the king smiling at his subjects. This was a grandfather smiling at his grandchildren. Louis waved at his grandfather. Charlotte did a perfect small curtsy. George bowed, just like his father had taught him. People watching thought it was a sweet moment. The old king connecting with the future kings. After the king and queen left the church, it would be time for William and his family to leave too. They would go to Buckingham Palace for the next part of the special day. But first, they needed to wait for all the important guests to leave in the right order. There were strict rules about who left first, second, and so on. "Now can I stretch my legs?" Louis asked. Catherine smiled. "Soon, darling. Just a little longer." William looked proudly at his family. They had done so well during the long ceremony. Now they just needed to get through the rest of this big day. After the ceremony ended, William and his family left Westminster Abbey. Outside, the crowds were even bigger now. Everyone wanted to see the royal family after the coronation. "Wave to the people," William reminded his children as they stepped out into the sunlight. The 3 children waved. Louis waved with both hands, making people laugh. Charlotte waved the way she had been taught, with her hand moving gently from side to side. George waved too, but more seriously, like his father. Camera flashes went off all around them. News people from all over the world took pictures and videos. These would be shown on TV in many countries. "The car will take us to Buckingham Palace now," Catherine told the children. "There will be a special lunch there. I'm hungry, Louis said. The ceremony had been very long, and he had been very good. Me too, said Charlotte. Do you think there will be cake? I'm sure there will be, William said with a smile. This is a very special day. The family got into their cars again. As they drove away from the abbey, people lined the streets. They waved flags and cheered. Some people had camped out all night to see this moment. Inside the car, the children relaxed a bit. They had been on their best behavior for hours. Did I do okay, Daddy? George asked. He always wanted to do things right. You all did wonderfully, William said. I'm very proud of you. Catherine helped Louis take off his small jacket. You were such a good boy in there, she told him. I know it was hard to sit still for so long. I counted all the big candles, Louis said. There were 82. William and Catherine smiled at each other. Their youngest son always noticed unusual things. The drive to Buckingham Palace didn't take long. When they arrived, there were even more security guards than before. The palace was big and grand, with a tall fence around it. Behind the fence, people were packed together, hoping to see the royal family. Inside the palace, staff members in fancy uniforms greeted them. These people worked for the royal family. Some of them had worked there for many years. Your Royal Highnesses, one older man said, bowing to William and Catherine. The king and queen are in the green drawing room. Thank you, Jenkins, William said. He had known this man since he was a boy. The family walked through the palace. The floors were shiny. The walls had paintings of kings and queens from long ago. Big vases held flowers in the colors of the British flag. It smells nice in here, Charlotte said. The palace was filled with the smell of flowers and good food. They found King Charles and Queen Camilla in a big room with green walls. Other royal family members were there too. Everyone was talking and laughing. The serious part of the day was over. Now it was time to celebrate. Charles saw his son and grandchildren come in. His face lit up with a smile. He still wore his crown, but he had taken off the heavy robes. There they are, he said. He opened his arms wide. The children ran to their grandfather. Even though he was king now, to them he was still grandpa. Louis reached him first and got a big hug. Charlotte curtsied quickly before getting her hug. George, trying to be grown-up, shook hands first, then got a hug too. Cameras clicked as photographers took pictures of this family moment. People would love to see these pictures. They showed that even kings are grandfathers too. William watched his father with his children. It was a happy sight. For a moment, he thought about his mother, Diana. She would have loved to see her grandchildren. She would have been so proud. Catherine came to stand beside him. Are you okay? She asked softly. She knew this day might bring up memories for him. Yes, William said. Just thinking about Mum. Catherine squeezed his hand. She would be so proud of you today. A servant came by with drinks on a silver tray. He offered them to William and Catherine. Thank you, William said. He took a glass for himself and one for Catherine. They watched as Queen Camilla helped Louis get a small cake from a table filled with food. The little prince looked very happy with his treat. Phase 1 complete, William said quietly to Catherine. Just the balcony appearance and the parade to go. Catherine smiled. The children are doing so well. I was worried Louis might not last through the ceremony. He's tougher than he looks, William said, watching his youngest son enjoy his cake. They all are. Lunch at Buckingham Palace was a grand affair. The big dining room was filled with people in fancy clothes. There were kings and queens from other countries. There were prime ministers and presidents. There were old friends of the royal family. William and Catherine sat at a long table with their children. The table had gold plates and many forks and knives. Crystal glasses sparkled in the light from big chandeliers. Which fork do I use? Louis whispered to Charlotte. There were 3 forks next to his plate. Start from the outside and work your way in, Charlotte told him. She had learned this from her mother. George was talking to a prince from another country who sat next to him. The boy was about George's age. They talked about soccer and video games. Even royal children liked the same things as regular children. Catherine watched her children with pride. They were doing so well in this formal setting. She caught William's eye across the table and smiled at him. The food was very fancy. There was soup in small cups. There was fish with special sauce. There was meat cooked just right. For the children, the kitchen had made fancy versions of foods they liked. "This chicken is good," Louis said, eating happily. A man with a camera came by their table. He was the official photographer. His pictures would go in history books someday. "Could we have a family photo?" he asked William. "Of course," William said. He and his family smiled for the camera. They were used to having their picture taken. They knew how to sit up straight and smile just right. After lunch, there was a special time for the royal family to rest before the next big event. They went to a private room where no cameras were allowed. Louis lay down on a sofa. He was tired from all the excitement. Charlotte sat with a lady-in-waiting who was fixing her hair. Some strands had come loose during lunch. George stood by the window, watching the crowds outside. "There are so many people out there," he said. "They've been waiting all day." William joined his son at the window. "They want to see the balcony appearance," he said. "It's a big tradition." "Will we all go on the balcony?" George asked. "Yes," William said. "The whole family will be there with Grandpa and Grandma Camilla." Catherine was checking her makeup in a mirror. Even though she looked perfect, she wanted to make sure. Millions of people would see her on TV soon. "When do we go on the balcony?" Charlotte asked. "In about 30 minutes, William said, checking his watch. Just enough time for Louis to have a short nap. But Louis wasn't napping. He was looking at a book about planes that someone had given him. He loved planes and was excited about the flyover that would happen during the balcony appearance. "Will the Red Arrows be there?" he asked. The Red Arrows were special planes that made colored smoke in the sky. "Yes, they will," William said. "They'll make red, white, and blue smoke for Grandpa." A palace worker knocked on the door. "Your Royal Highnesses, it's time to prepare for the balcony appearance," he said. The family got up. Helpers straightened William's uniform and Catherine's dress. They made sure the children looked perfect. William bent down to talk to his children. "This is very important," he said. "Millions of people will be watching us on the balcony. We need to be on our best behavior. Wave to the people and smile." "And stand still," Catherine added. "No jumping or running on the balcony." "I'll be good," Louis promised. "I want to see the planes." They walked together through the grand halls of the palace. Paintings of old kings and queens looked down at them from the walls. William thought about how someday there would be paintings of his father on these walls, and later, paintings of him, and someday, far in the future, paintings of George. They reached a set of big glass doors. Beyond the doors was the famous balcony where the royal family had stood for many important events over the years. King Charles and Queen Camilla were waiting for them. Charles had changed into a different uniform, but he still wore his crown. He smiled when he saw his family. "Ready for the big moment?" he asked William. William nodded. "We're all ready, Father." Outside, they could hear the crowd cheering. Thousands of people were waiting to see them. The doors would open soon, and they would step into history. The big glass doors opened. Bright sunlight flooded in. The sound of cheering grew much louder. It was time for the balcony appearance. King Charles stepped out first. Queen Camilla was beside him. The crowd roared when they saw their new king and queen. People waved flags harder. Many took pictures with their phones. William and Catherine followed with their children. They lined up on the balcony in a perfect row. William stood tall in his uniform. Catherine looked beautiful in her cream dress. The children stood between their parents. "Wow," Louis said, his eyes wide. "So many people." Below them, the huge space in front of Buckingham Palace was filled with people as far as they could see. The mall, the long road leading to the palace, was a sea of red, white, and blue flags. Some people had been waiting there since early morning. The royal family waved to the crowds. They had special ways of waving that didn't make their arms tired. Catherine had taught the children how to wave properly. Louis sometimes forgot and waved too hard, which made people laugh. "Look at all the flags," Charlotte said. She loved seeing how happy everyone was. George stood very straight, like his father. He was aware that someday he would be king, and people would cheer for him like this. It was a big thought for a young boy. A palace worker came to stand behind William. "The planes will be here in 2 minutes, sir," he said quietly. William nodded and told his family, "The flyover is coming soon. Look to the sky in that direction," he said, pointing. Louis bounced a little on his toes. He had been waiting for this all day. Catherine put a gentle hand on his shoulder to remind him to stand still. The crowd below suddenly pointed and cheered. The first planes were coming. They flew in perfect formation over London, heading straight for the palace. There were big military planes and fast fighter jets. "Here they come," Louis shouted. His parents didn't mind his excitement this time. Everyone was looking up at the sky. The planes roared overhead. They were so close that the royal family could see the pilots waving. Some planes released colored smoke, red, white, and blue, the colors of the British flag. "Look at that one." Charlotte pointed at a plane shaped differently from the others. "That's a Spitfire," George told her. "It's a very old plane from World War II. He knew a lot about planes because William had taught him. The red arrows came last. These were special planes that did tricks in the sky. They flew in a perfect line, then spread out like fingers opening. The colored smoke they left behind made a beautiful pattern in the sky. Louis clapped his hands. "That's the best part," he said. The whole family watched with smiles on their faces. Even King Charles looked up with wonder. For a moment, they were just a family enjoying the special show together. When the last plane disappeared, the crowd cheered again. The royal family waved one more time. Then King Charles turned to leave the balcony. But before he went inside, he did something unexpected. He put his arm around William's shoulder and gave him a quick hug. Cameras caught this moment between father and son. It wasn't a king and his hair in that moment. It was just a father and son sharing the happy day. The family went back inside the palace. Louis was talking fast about all the planes he had seen. Charlotte was telling Catherine how many people she had counted in the crowd. George was quiet, thinking about everything that had happened. "You all did perfectly," William told his children. "I'm very proud of you. Can we take off these fancy clothes now?" Louis asked, pulling at his collar. The adults laughed. "Yes," Catherine said. "We have a little break before the parade. You can put on something more comfortable." "But not for long," William reminded them. "The day isn't over yet." The children went with their nanny to change clothes. William and Catherine had a moment alone. "They were wonderful," Catherine said. "All of them." William nodded. They understand the importance of days like this, even Louis in his own way. "Your father looked so happy," Catherine said. "That hug on the balcony was special." "Yes," William said with a smile. "It was." Outside, the crowds were moving now. They wanted to find good spots to watch the parade that would come next. The celebration of the new king was continuing all through London. After their short break, it was time to get ready for the parade. The children had changed into more comfortable clothes, but they still looked smart and neat. Louis wore a blue outfit. Charlotte wore a pretty dress with a small crown of flowers in her hair. George wore a suit that matched his father's. "The parade will go from the palace through the city," William explained to the children. "People will be watching all along the way." "Will we ride in a carriage?" Charlotte asked. She loved the royal carriages with their gold decorations. "Yes," Catherine said. "We'll ride in the third carriage. Grandpa and Grandma Camilla will be in the first one." The family walked down to the palace courtyard where the carriages waited. The carriages were very old but well cared for. They shined in the afternoon sun. Horses with special decorations would pull the carriages. Louis ran over to pat one of the horses. "He's so big," he said. A worker helped the little prince give the horse a sugar cube. Photographers took pictures of this sweet moment. People loved to see the royal children acting like normal kids. King Charles and Queen Camilla came out to the courtyard. Charles had changed his crown for a smaller one that was lighter to wear. He looked happy but a bit tired. It had been a long day already. "All ready for the next part?" he asked William. "Yes, father," William said. "The children are excited about the carriage ride." Charles bent down to talk to his grandchildren. "Remember to wave to the people," he said. "They've waited a long time to see us today." "I'm good at waving," Louis said, showing his grandfather how he could wave. Charles laughed. "Yes, you are," he said. "You're a natural." The royal family got into their carriages. King Charles and Queen Camilla went first in a very fancy gold carriage. William, Catherine, and their children got into their carriage later. The inside of the carriage was soft and comfortable. The windows were large so people could see the royal family inside. The children sat between their parents. "Remember to smile and wave," Catherine reminded them as the carriage started to move. The procession left Buckingham Palace through the big gates. Right away, they could hear people cheering. The streets were packed with crowds. People waved flags and took pictures as the carriages passed by. "Look at that little girl," Charlotte said, pointing to a child about her age who was waving a flag. "She has a dress just like mine." William smiled. Many little girls tried to dress like Charlotte. She was very popular. The carriage moved slowly through London. They passed famous places like Trafalgar Square and Piccadilly Circus. Every spot was filled with happy people. "My arm is getting tired from waving," Louis said after a while. "You can take a little break," Catherine told him. "Just keep smiling." The parade route was lined with soldiers in red coats and tall black hats. They stood very straight and didn't smile. George watched them with interest. "Will I be a soldier someday like you, Dad?" he asked William. "If you want to be," William said. "It's a tradition in our family to serve in the military." The carriage ride lasted for almost an hour. By the end, even Charlotte was getting tired. But they all kept waving and smiling. They knew how important this day was. As they returned to the palace, they saw even more people waiting to see them. The crowds had not gone home yet. They wanted to see every moment of this historic day. "You've all done so well," William told his children as the carriage entered the palace gates. "Just one more event to go." "What's next?" George asked. "A special photo session," Catherine said. "Then a family dinner with Grandpa." The children were tired but happy. They had been part of history today. Years from now, people would look at pictures of this day and remember how the young royal family had brought style and grace to the coronation. As they stepped down from the carriage, palace workers came to help them. The afternoon sun was starting to get lower in the sky. The biggest parts of the day were over, but there were still memories to be made. Louis yawned and leaned against his father's leg. William picked him up. Even royal children got tired after such a big day. "Almost done," he whispered to his youngest son. "You've been very brave today." The last official event of the day was a special photo session. The royal family gathered in the throne room of Buckingham Palace. This room had red walls and gold decorations. 2 big thrones sat at one end of the room. King Charles sat on one throne. Queen Camilla sat on the other. William and Catherine stood behind them. The children stood in front of their grandparents. "Stand up straight," Catherine whispered to Louis, who was starting to slump a little. He was very tired now. The official photographer had a big camera. "Perfect," he said. "This picture will be in history books." Louis tried hard not to yawn. Charlotte stood very still. George looked serious, like his father. Flash. The camera took the first picture. Then many more pictures were taken. Some with just King Charles and William. Some with all the children. Some with different groups of the royal family. "Just a few more," the photographer said. "These are coming out beautifully." When the photo session was finally over, Louis let out a big sigh. Everyone laughed. They were all tired too. King Charles came over to William and his family. "Thank you all for today," he said. "You made me very proud." "We are proud of you too, Father," William said. The king bent down to speak to his grandchildren. "You three were wonderful," he said. "The best behaved children in all of England." The children smiled at their grandfather. Even though he was king now, he still gave the best hugs. "Can we have dinner now?" Louis asked. "I'm starving." The adults laughed again. Louis always said exactly what he was thinking. "Yes, dinner is ready," Charles said. "And I think there might be ice cream for dessert." The children's eyes lit up at this news. After such a long day of being good, ice cream was the perfect reward. The royal family went to a private dining room. This was not a fancy state dinner. This was just family time. The room was smaller and cozier than the big dining rooms in the palace. William helped Louis climb into his chair. Catherine fixed Charlotte's hair, which had come loose during the long day. George sat up straight, still trying to be perfect even though he was tired. Palace workers brought in the food. It was simpler than lunch had been. There was roast chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. The king had asked for food the children would enjoy. As they ate, they talked about the day. Charlotte told everyone about a girl she had seen who was dressed just like her. George talked about the planes he had spotted in the flyover. Louis described the horse he had petted. "What was your favorite part of the day?" Catherine asked the children. "The planes," Louis said right away. "I liked the carriage ride," Charlotte said. "All the people were so happy to see us." "I liked when Dad bowed to Grandpa," George said quietly. It looked important. William and Catherine shared a look. Their oldest son understood more than they realized. King Charles smiled at his family. "My favorite part was having all of you with me," he said. "Days like this are better when you share them with people you love." Outside the palace, the crowds were finally going home. The streets of London were filled with people talking about the wonderful day. Many had taken pictures they would keep forever. On TV, news people were still talking about the coronation. They showed pictures of the royal family again and again. Many talked about how well-behaved the children had been. Others talked about how beautiful Catherine had looked. Everyone agreed that William had seemed every inch the future king. As night fell over London, the royal family finished their dinner. The children were almost falling asleep at the table. "I think it's time to go home," William said. "It's been a very long day." They said goodbye to King Charles and Queen Camilla. There were hugs and kisses. Then William, Catherine, and the children got into cars to go back to their own home. As the cars drove away from the palace, Louis fell asleep against his mother's arm. Charlotte's eyes were heavy too. Even George was yawning. William looked out at the night lights of London. Today, his father had become king. Today, William had moved one step closer to his own destiny. But right now, he was simply a father taking his tired children home after a very special day. The coronation was over, but the memory of how Prince William and his family had brought style and grace to the day would live on in history.